Good morning, everyone. It is Friday, January 15th, 2016, and this is Gersh's Gaming Diamond or Ragequit. Now, last week, at the end, talked about what I was going to work on this week, and I mentioned that there were kind of two things on my mind. First was that I was going to try and refine my Protoss versus Protoss build, and try and figure out ways to deal with, like, Dark Templar rushes and such like that. Then this week, when I actually went to play games, I ran into a bunch of Terran players. So, kind of like it or not, I had to figure out a Terran strategy, and I got subjected to some Terran early rushes and Gs and all-ins, and so this video is the result of that. Today, I have two different games I want to show, which has me sort of losing in two different, interesting, and unique ways. But I think they illustrate sort of some different concepts and some different... what's the word I'm looking for? Different aspects of the game that I think are worth exploring. So, let's go ahead and dive in. Oops. Here we go. Alright, so this is the first game, and we're going to go through this pretty quick because I just want to get straight to the issue that came up here. So the build that I was sort of working on at the beginning of the week against Terran, I'm getting pretty familiar with this gate, expand, core, and then kind of saturate the gas. Things are looking good so far. Got a second gate. Twilight Council's coming up. And it's around about here that things get really horrible. So you can see I go for the early Twilight Council. Oh, there we go. Yeah, blink and you'll miss it. Let's go back for 10 seconds. So my Terran opponent comes in with a medevac at about the 4.5 minute mark, and drops 2 Widow Mines in my main base, blows up, oh god, a whole bunch of workers, then flies over here, drops a 3rd Widow Mine, and then takes off. So, in those 20 seconds, I lost 17 workers. That's... oh, God, that's just horrifying. So let us take the moment and examine kind of what exactly is a Widow Mine. Why is it so dangerous to workers? So this is a little mechanical unit. It's produced at the factory for the Terrans. Doesn't require any additional tech, doesn't require a tech lab, doesn't require an armory. It's just a bare factory that makes these guys, right? And they don't have a lot of defense, but they burrow. Once they burrow, they're immobile, but they are invisible unless you have stealth detection, and they launch rockets that do rather painful damage. I can't remember what the exact is, and for some reason that mouse over isn't working. But, yeah, so at this point, I have a robotics facility under construction, and I don't really want to watch the rest of this game, because at this point, I've lost, effectively. I mean, I kept playing for another 3 minutes, but I was basically done. I built a robotics facility. I built an observer. One thing that I should have done is gone over here, built another nexus so I could keep mining, but this basically shut down my economy completely for about 2 minutes while I got the Widow Mines dealt with. Part of the issue was I brought my army and the observer once it came out right here, and the Widow Mine fired at it, and it blew up the observer, so I thought the Widow Mine had been destroyed, sent workers back to go mining, and then the Widow Mine was still there, and it blew up another set of workers. So, yeah. So, this is one of a couple of rough tactics that a Terran player can subject you to in the early game. Another one that doesn't have much of a counter is coming in with a Cloaked Banshee. Typically just need 1 or 2, and again you can wreck the entire mineral line for no retaliation, effectively. So, let's quit out of this game and go to let's go to the game that I found a solution for. So this whole thing, this is one of the things that really highlights to me how important having a good build order is. Why do we even have build orders, right? That's a valid question. And the reason is, in the early game, there's a lot of stuff that can kill you. And if you don't have a way of dealing with that stuff, then you don't ever make it to a point where you can fight your enemy. You lose before you've even started playing. And this problem, admittedly, was ultimately why I didn't end up playing a whole lot in Heart of the Swarm, was because I just never really clicked with me that the build orders are sometimes as much for defense as they are for offense. And the nice thing is with Protoss, with the Mothership Core being the linchpin of the Protoss defense, there's a lot of early aggression and early builds that we've seen, like in a versus Zerg game, that Protoss don't have to worry about as strongly, but other races perhaps do, because the Mothership Core has the ability to overcharge a pylon and just wreck conventional attack forces, even fast conventional attack forces, because the Mothership Core can be brought out so early. So this game here, I specifically asked a friend to Widow Mine drop me, and it wasn't quite as fast as the previous game, but my defenses were still up. So let me show you how I modified the build in order to prevent what happened in the last game, and also this would prevent Cloaked Banshees from taking me out as well. So it's the same basic start: gate, gas, expand, then saturate the gas, get a cybernetics core, and the second gas, and a second pylon. That order right there allows you to prevent being supply blocked while getting the most important building that the Protoss need, which is the Cyber Core, as soon as possible. Now, the difference here is I went, transferred workers, etc., got the Mothership Core, still researching Warp Gate, got an early robotics facility. And what I'm going to do is blind. I'm going to produce an observer and make sure he's out by the 4-minute mark. Now, there's a couple of reasons for this. And here comes the observer. Alright, so reason 1 is to prevent exactly what happened last game, which is a Widow Mine drop at the 4.5-minute mark. Second reason that the observer is important is to defend against Cloaked Banshees, because between the Mothership Core, a couple of Stalkers, 1 observer, I can defend against both of those kinds of attacks. Third thing, Terrans have a habit of doing this, which is building a wall at their entrance, and unlike Protoss, when we build a wall, we gotta leave a gap, usually, so units can still work their way through. Terrans don't have to do that because supply depots can... I'm clicking on this button like it'll actually work, but supply depots can hide underground. You can lower the supply depot, have units walk by, and then raise it back up. Terrans also have very, very few melee units. Protoss have, well, still not that many, but, you know, Protoss use zealots and such like that, so, you know, hiding a handful of stalkers behind a wall is nice, but anyway, that's neither here nor there. An observer can get inside the enemy's base and see what's going on, whereas a scouting probe, which is what this guy was supposed to be, a lot of times will never make it, because you have supply depot barracks, and then later it's shifted over and Tech Lab or Reactor goes here, whatever. But the scouting probe will never get in. So I have no idea. If we go to the Gersh cam, right? I have no idea what my opponent's doing. I just know that he's got a wall. That's it. Now, what about other early aggression with Terran? Well, again, I've said it before, but that's really what a couple of stalkers. I think I should have an adept out here. It's good to have one of those. A couple of stalkers, a couple of adepts, and a mothership core. And that, plus good strategically placed pylons, is the defense that a Protoss player needs in the first few minutes of the game. Now, we will see how this works in just a moment. He does come in at a Widow Mine drop, I think at about the 6-minute mark, which is late, but it's fine. As you see, I built a second observer. Oh, and there it is. I look away for a few seconds and... Alright, so here it is. He's dropping it off right now. He brought Widow Mines and Marines, which I thought was an interesting variant on the strategy. At this point, my observer's over here, because I thought this base is more vulnerable, so I thought it would be more likely that he would do the drop over here. So, instead... Now, one thing I haven't mentioned is that Widow Mines have a very long cooldown. So this bar right here represents their cooldown. I can't see it. But now I've got the observer parked on top. 4 stalkers come in. That's 1 Widow Mine. I somehow missed this guy for a little bit. Taken care of. Alright, now you look at the losses tab. Still lost 13 workers, but I don't have both of my bases destroyed, right? And I was still making income during that time. I don't feel like this is where I lost, especially because I got a third coming up here. So let's fast forward. So at this point, I'm trying to do what my normal Terran thing is, which the new strategy that I'm working on is kind of 6 gateways, an Adept Stalker Colossus combination. You see the Robo Bay coming down there. This still isn't a very clean build yet. There's a lot of mistakes here. I really needed at least 5 and 6 gas. I needed to start mining at my natural earlier. There's a lot that's dirty on this build. But I did see his army. That's nice. So, seeing that he had a lot of bio, I kind of transitioned, grabbed some High Templar. We have a good fight that comes up in here. So, this fight, I pretty much lost. Actually thought that fight was more of a draw in my memory. That's when things went badly, but I don't think that's really when I lost. I mean, I'm recovering on the army supply pretty quickly. Here's where things, I think, start to go wrong, is I'm not following up on my scouting, right, and realize that, oh gosh, he's got a whole bunch of siege tanks here. I'm still kind of building the same... thing, and I feel like I needed to switch up my tech here, because against this army, which is... let's see, a Raven, he's got a couple of Ghosts, bunch of Siege Tanks, and a lot of Marauders. And my response is I'm building, I think, Zealots with Charge. No, they don't even have Charge. I'm just building Zealots. And I'm building Adepts. I think this is very much the wrong unit combination. And when I eventually get out here, as you can see, Colossi, not so good against Siege Tanks. That's pretty much the end of the game. So I think it's important to talk about sort of the concept of switching up tech. Terrans don't have a very good ability to switch up tech. That's because kind of once they invest in their buildings, they're kind of set, right? Barracks produce infantry, factories produce siege tanks, starports produce things that fly. This is a lot of times why you hear Terrans talking about either going bio, meaning infantry, biological units, or mech, factory units. In this case, maybe this isn't the best example because it's one factory that's producing sort of a monster load of siege tanks. But even so, one of my great weaknesses in the game is scouting. It's not something that I've worked on before. And I'm sorry, I'm getting all distracted here. Let me try this one more time. Alright, so Terrans can't switch up their tech as fast as Protoss can, because with Protoss, any army you have is going to be built around gateway units. Is going to be built around Zealot, Stalker, Adept, some High Templar, Dark Templar, but mostly Zealot, Stalker, Adept, and then that is going to be supplemented by something. That something could be High Templar, eventually turning into Archons. That something could be Immortals, could be Colossi, could be Disruptors, could be Air, could be Void Rays, could be Tempests. Right? The army I chose to defend was not the right army against a massive siege tanks. And I have the ability, as a Protoss player, to change up my tech and my army composition to match what my opponent is doing. And I didn't. Now, it's worth mentioning that Zerg have the best ability to do this, right? Because Zerg produce all of their units from a single larva. So what that means is if you destroy a Zerg army that is Roach Hydralisk, and then you walk over to their base, you could find that their army is Zergling Infestor Mutalisk. I'm just pulling things out. I don't know if that's actually a composition. And that can totally happen. With Protoss, I haven't gone for the starport yet. I can't really bring that in super fast. But upon seeing the army composition that I was facing back here, and then if I had actually scouted my enemy decently at all. So let's take a look at this army composition before we engage. First off, oops, army supply is pretty even, so this isn't a case of a high food army beating a low food army. One thing he does have hiding in here is a couple of ghosts, which used their delightful EMP ability to destroy the shields on my units, which basically cut them down to half strength. But see, this army is... he's got 30 Marines, but the army is a lot heavier on big armored units than usual, right? He's got 5 siege tanks, 13 Marauders. So let's put it back on faster as we engage here. So the other thing that those High Templar abilities do, that the EMP does, is it drains the energy off of my High Templar. So even if I had Psystorm researched, which I think is still almost done, I'm not sure I would have been able to get one off, right? What High Templar do I have in this army? I have just 2 remaining, neither of which even has the energy for a Psy Storm. If I could have dropped a Psy Storm here, battle might have turned out differently. But I do, kill most of the Marines here because Adepts are really good at that. They're okay at killing Marauders. But at this point, as I retreat, the right move isn't to make Colossi, it's to make Immortals. And the right move is not, as I do here in a couple of minutes, warp in Adepts, but to warp in Stalkers. So yeah, bad tech switch, bad scouting. Scouting's not something I'm currently highly focused on, but in the future, that's definitely one of the next shoes to drop. As far as this, that's basically all I have. That's the game for today. Definitely some good stuff going on. I like this new Terran build that goes with Colossi, because when you end up going against the Bio Ball, it kind of wrecks them. Also, that timing push could have been better. It would have been nicer if I had waited until the Psystorm had finished researching before pushing out, in case I ran into his army. Maybe have made more High Templar, but I was a little gas-starved because I got these up late. There's a lot of little things, right? Earlier gas, better tech transitions, etc. Those are things I'm going to be working on, going to be continuing to refine this build. Continuing to work on Protoss versus Protoss as well. Question you might be having is, I talked about how one of the main reasons this build survives in the early game is getting the fast Robo and the fast Observer. And given the fact that last week I was talking about losing to Dark Templar, the question may be, well, why don't I just have the fast Observer against Protoss? And I'll admit it's something that I'm thinking about, but whereas the Observer prevents... The Observer does 3 things for me. The early Observers do 3 things for me in a game versus Terran. Allows me to get past the wall, allows me to defend against Widow Mines, and allows me to defend against Cloaked Banshees. Against Protoss, the Observer really only does 1 of those things, which is help me defend against Dark Templar rushes. So I would prefer to hold off on the Robo Bay until my initial Probe Scout, which is the only scouting I'm doing consistently, is able to tell me kind of what they're going for. And then figure out how to respond to that. The flip side of that coin, which again I mentioned last week, is what if I got fast Oracles? Because their Revelation ability allows them to see cloaked units for a short period of time, and they also have a weapon that can kill Dark Templar fairly quickly, and they're also a flying unit, so the Dark Templar can't retaliate against them. Geez, that sounds like Providence, doesn't it? Now, frankly, I don't know if I can get 2 or 3 Oracles out in time to defend a Dark Templar rush. And if I have the Oracles out to defend against a Dark Templar rush, that means I'm not going in and harassing with the Oracles and destroying my opponent's economy. So there's a line to walk there, and I haven't figured out where that is. That is also a priority for me to figure out this week. I think that's all I got. So, I think that's it for today. Let me know how you think I'm doing. Leave me a comment, share the video, and I will see you all next week. Cheers.